This video is going to help you with your skills for close reading of prose. It relates to students of literature who have a close reading in an exam that they need to do and who struggle to find things to say about an unseen prose text. It's going to make reference to the Literature ATAR course for the West Australian curriculum and the Literature ATAR exam and its marking key. And so let's first go back to understanding where our marks come from, because we're preparing for an exam here. It comes from readings of text, use of evidence, literary concepts and terms, and expression of ideas. Notice that readings of text has the most marks, but it is only a portion of the overall marks. And so what I tend to see sometimes from students is that the version of a reading is simply a retell of the text, a retelling of the plot, and it's really hard to get some good evidence. What I want to be able to do is to point you to a meatier reading, but one where you don't have to panic, where it can start from a simple place, so that way you can use evidence and concepts really thoroughly. And so with prose texts, read the end first, then read from the start. It's not a mystery, so you want to see where it's going. Then take a step back, because our overall goal here is to be able to identify the conflict that's going on in the text, and there's always a conflict. I want you to consider the extract as a whole. What's happening in it? What's the general plot? What conflict is there for the main character? And to know that conflicts are always about values. Because conflict is a battle over what's important to a person. It might be a struggle that a character is having to belong, to survive, or to come to terms with a major event. As an audience, we can then consider what the character values, whether what the character values is aligned with our own values or at odds with them. And so when we can identify the conflict and understand that conflict is about values, we've opened up our reading to a whole bunch of ideas. Once we can identify the conflict, we can then have a sense of the values that are at play. We can then develop a reading. We can also make meaning of the interesting uses of language and the generic features of the text. And we can then bring in a discussion about context, because context is about values as well. By identifying the conflict and seeing values at play, we've opened up a whole bunch of ideas. Now let's have a look at the extract that was used in the 2017 paper. It was an extract by Madeline Dickey called Troppo. Now I'm not going to read this whole text to you, obviously. Go buy the novel, it's really, really good. It's on Amazon. And you can get a copy of the extract online. So I'm going to start, I've read it, and I'm going to give you the general overview, the stepping back view that would help us in an exam. Penny's an experienced traveller to Bali, and she genuinely works to immerse in the culture. She prefers Bali to Australia, but is not at all like conventional Aussie tourists. Now the main conflict here is that she's still treated as an outsider, no matter how much she tries to immerse. She can speak Balinese, and we see that in the text. Even though she's shut out by many people in Bali, she still finds comfort among women in the Balinese markets. So, how can I develop readings just from that? Well, by using the plot of the text and its conflict, we can say that the extract is about the experience of being treated like an outsider, or it's about the solidarity among women, or it's about the sterility and crassness of Australian culture. So these are three interesting readings that can be substantiated with extensive evidence and analysis from this text. And that's just by starting at what it's generally about and locating the conflict. And so how does identifying the conflict help with our analysis? Well, in this text, we can see how the language to describe the setting allows us to share her sense of wonder. It points us to Dickey's inventive use of Balinese language in the text, showing us that she's fluent, yet allowing the reader to follow. It's a really interesting use of language that Dickey uses here that I could really spend some time dealing with in a reading. By identifying the conflict, we can see the contrast in language when she describes Australia, the Australian tourists in Bali, but as well as the sterility of shops in Australia. And it also allows us to make sense of the moment when she's treated differently by the shopkeeper, and in turn, when she's treated well by the women in the market. And that all began simply by identifying the conflict first. Then I can develop my reading. And so start by simply reading the text as part of a story. Find the conflict in the scene. Use the conflict to develop an interpretation of what the extract is really about. And support it with evidence and analysis. I hope that simplifies the process for you for seeing an unseen text. I hope you found that helpful, and good luck with your work towards your exams.